Welcome, and thank you for standing by. All participants will be on listen only until the question and answer session of today's conference. As a reminder, the conference call is being recorded. If you have any objections, please disconnect at this time. I would now like to turn the call over to your host. Ma'am, you may begin.
Thank you, and good afternoon for those of you joining on the East and West Coast. Thank you for joining us for our webinar on what is an ECCN number. I'm pleased to note that we have more than 43 people registered for this webinar today. My name is Linda Abrazizi. I am an International Trade Specialist for the Marketing Communications Office for the U.S. Commercial Service at Department of Commerce. This webinar is being brought to you in cooperation by the U.S. Commercial Service and the Bureau of Industry and Security, and I would like to welcome all participants in the export community who are joining us from all across the United States to learn about the classification of items on the Commerce Control List. In a moment, I'll turn this presentation over to Mark Jaso, engineer of the Office of National Security and Technology Transfer Controls for the Bureau of Industry and Security. Mark will be available at the end of this presentation to answer your questions. Contact information will also be provided. Now, for those of you who just joined, you can still log on to this webinar by entering the URL, website, and passcode per instructions that were sent to you. We do have a few housekeeping details to make sure you get the most benefit from this afternoon's webinar. You will be able to hear this presentation via your telephone and view it simultaneously. If you are not hooked up through both, please take a moment to do this. And if you are experiencing any technical difficulties during this presentation, please press *0. We will be taking written and voice questions. To ask a written question, we invite you to type in questions on your screen as they occur to you during this presentation. On the upper left-hand side of your computer, there is an icon with the letters Q and A on the top of your screen. If you click and type in your question on this icon, we will be receiving them, and we will compile these questions and then present them after the presentation. Type questions which are not answered during this webinar due to time constraints, we will get back to you with a personal email. To ask a voice question during this webinar, please press *1 and an operator will assist you. In addition, for those of you who want a copy of the PowerPoint presentation slides from this webinar, on the upper right-hand side of your computer, there is an icon that looks like there are 3 sheets of paper overlapping one another. If you place your mouse's cursor over this icon, you can download the PowerPoint presentation slides to your desktop or to another folder. In addition, all listeners will be provided with any information for any individual file counseling, expert assistance, or market research. Now, for those of you who just joined us, you can still log in on the Internet conference. And now I'd like to introduce live online Mark Jaso, engineer of the Office of National Security and Technology Transfer Controls for the Bureau of Industry and Security. Mark, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Linda. As Linda said, my name is Mark Jaso. I'm an engineer with BIS. And just to give you a little more background into the areas that I work in, I'm in the Sensors and Aviation group, and we are responsible for lasers, optics, night vision equipment, radar, navigation components, and aviation and marine products. So if throughout the presentation or afterwards you find that your items fall in categories 6 through 9, that would be the area that my group works within. We are separated into different groups based on technology. So there are specialists in the other fields that cover categories 0 through 5. So if you do have questions after the presentation and we're not able to address them, send me an email or respond through the webinar, and we'll try to put you in touch with the people who will be able to address your questions directly. So today I'm going to go through the classification of items on the Commerce Control List, and depending on your level of experience, some of it may seem very basic, or if you're just getting into the area of export controls, they'd be very valuable to you to go through this and get a better feeling for the classification process. Okay. Topics for discussion, we'll go through what an export control classification number is, or ECCM number. Please, you'll find that We use quite a few acronyms in this business, so if you find me going in and out of acronyms, at the end of the presentation I can try to clarify any questions you have on it. The ECCM numbers refer to a listing called the Commerce Control List, which is where we try to break down all the different controls for the items that are being exported. The Commerce Control List is derived from different groups, worldwide groups, such as the Wassenaar Group, which is comprised of 44 countries, which put together items that they feel should be controlled for different reasons. There's a Nuclear Suppliers Group. There's a Chem and Bio group that handles chemical weapons. And they get together periodically throughout the year, and they put together these lists that the different countries control exports against. We'll discuss self-classification. There are two ways you can get your item classified. One is to submit a classification request through our SNAP-R system. Go to BIS, where one of the engineering staff will classify the items for you, and the other option is self-classification, and that is where you take it upon yourself to look at the item and the technical aspects of it and go into the Commerce Control List and determine where it falls there. And it's up to you to determine whether a license is required or what other types of controls or license exceptions you might have available to you. But we'll get into that a little later in the presentation. And again, there is the official commodity classification request that you would submit through SNAP-R, and that would come into our office. There is the export control decision tree, and if anyone's ever been to the seminars that you can attend around the country, this is probably the most popular slide that we offer. And it takes you through methodology that you might want to follow to determine whether or not your item first needs a license, and then go through the ECCM process, and then the whole export or review for whether an export license is required. For this presentation, we will be working in the top tier where it says, is your item classified under an ECCM number on the Commerce Control List? And that's where you determine either the control number or whether it's EAR 99, which means it's still subject to export controls, export regulations, but it's not cited specifically in the Commerce Control List, so it can go to most places without a license required. There are exceptions to that, but in many cases it's the most open classification we have for destinations. Why are classifications so important? And as the picture on the slide indicates, it's trying to keep you out of hot water. It's proper classifications can prevent any violations to the export control regulations. You'll know where your item can go with a license or without a license, whether license exceptions are available, meaning no license would be required for that transaction. But more importantly for your business process, it also reduces any delays in exporting. If you're able to look at your item, if an order comes in, and self-classify it and determine whether or not a license is required, that can save you valuable time in the whole licensing process. License typically takes 30 to 35 days to go through the whole process from when you submit it with all the documentation to when we get all the recommendations back for conditions and approval from the other agencies. So if you can determine ahead of time whether or not that delay was necessary, meaning you found that no license was required, then that's a benefit to your business. We have the Commerce Control List. and that's in Part 774 of the export regulations. You can go both online, or if you have a hard copy of the export regulations, you could check there. One note is that the Internet version is the most up-to-date version, so it has the most recent changes, and the changes can occur periodically throughout the year, so it's worth going in and reviewing the Commerce Control List periodically to make sure the classification of your item has not changed. This may be getting a little ahead, but there are times when items are reduced in the control parameters, meaning it may be controlled for national security, and after review of the items at some of the different international conferences, it may be decontrolled, so a license would not be required. There are other instances where, after review of some of the technical characteristics of a system, it may be necessary to increase the control regimen on there. So where a license may not have been required before, there may be one now. So it's worth going in there and building it into your business plan to check the Commerce Control List from time to time, both to certify or reclassify where the item falls and also to check the controls. Now, the Commerce Control List contains all the items that are subject to licensing authority of BIS. Now, that gets into jurisdiction. We have the Commerce List, which the items subject to commerce jurisdiction, but there are also other agencies that control other items. For instance, military items are controlled under the Department of State. They do the licensing for USML items, the U.S. munitions list items, and that's under a set of regulations called the ITAR. So you would not have an item listed on both jurisdictions. It's either with BIS or it would be with the State Department for USML items. And there are instances where you have items that are under the licensing authority of Treasury or for the Department of Energy. Now, each item or each entry on this Commerce Control List has what's called an ECCM number. And as we get further into this, we'll break down what the ECCM numbers mean. And most items we try to describe by their technical parameters. And we try to do the technical parameters because, for instance, in lasers, we had a recent revision, major revision, to category 6A005, where before we used to call out specific names of items, not so much the technology, but the like a ruby laser or argon laser. And what we found was the technology was progressing so quickly that there are many more items we wanted to control, but by limiting ourselves to the names of those items, it was very restrictive from the control side of things. So we had a major revision where we went to wavelength, power, energy, and that was a more effective control for both us, and it was more straightforward for exporters to understand where their products would fall. Now, what does the export control classification number mean or tell us? It tells us what items are controlled. You'll find within certain product groups that, based on power levels or performance, frequency of operation, they may or may not be controlled. Why we control them, why BIS controls them. There are national security reasons. Sometimes there are missile technology, nuclear, non-proliferation reasons. All those are contained within the ECCN categories that you'll see and listed on the Commerce Control List. And by understanding those, you'll be able to determine which destinations require a license. You'll take the information from the Commerce Control List based on the ECCM number, and you can go to the country chart in Supplement 1 of Part 738. And if you have a particular destination, a country that you're going to export to, you would determine from the listing, the ECCM listing, what type of controls are in place. For instance, national security reasons, they have an NS1 and an NS2 listing. That's identified in the Commerce Control List. And you take that to the country chart, you go down to the country that you're going to export to and scroll across under the NS2, for instance, category, and see if there's an X there. If there's no X there, then no license is required. If there's an X there, then a license would be required. Also listed under the ECCM numbers are license exceptions, list-based license exceptions, and that has to do with the particular destinations that you're going to, and you can determine through license exceptions, you may not need a license to go to that particular destination, and we'll get into that later. We'll just touch on license exceptions and how they relate to the Commerce Control List. The structure of the ECCM, again, this may be basic for some people, but it's a good start to get familiar with this process. 0 relates to, the first number relates to the category. There are a total of 10 categories, go through 0 through 9. There's a product group as the second character listed there, and that can go from hardware, category A. B is usually test equipment. C can be materials. D would be software, and E would be technology. It'll become more apparent as we get into this that they're all related to the particular category. And then the final 3 characters relate to the type of control. The different numbers will relate to whether it's a national security control, missile technology, nuclear control. And as you start reviewing your products, you'll become more familiar with that when you look down in the product listing, and you'll see where the item is controlled for. Here are the different categories in the Commerce Control List. 0 is miscellaneous and nuclear materials. There are things like nuclear materials and horses by sea under miscellaneous for category 0. We have some odd listings for different products that fall within categories that you'd be surprised. Now, if this seems overwhelming at first, there is an appendix with examples of products and where they would fall under the Commerce Control List. So if you're on the Internet, you go to the BIS website, you can look the different breakdown of the export regulations, and there is an appendix you can refer to, and sometimes that serves as a very effective guide as trying to determine where your products fall in the Commerce Control List, because you may have some electronic systems, but it may fall under electronics, computers, could be under navigation. So by checking the appendix, it might provide a guideline as to where to start looking for this particular product. So category 1, we have materials, chemicals, microorganisms, toxins. 2, materials processing, like machine tools. There are also dimensional measurement systems included in that, interferometers that may attach to machine tools. 3 is electronics, usually electronic components, microwave components, electronic systems. Also, your semiconductor processing equipment is found under category 3. 4 is computers. 5 is telecommunications systems. It could be fiber optic systems. Some fiber optic telecom cable is caught there. Part 2 of category 5, information security like encryption. Category 6, sensors, lasers. There are hydrophones, night vision equipment. Radar is found in Category 6. 7, navigation, avionics systems. 8 is marine systems, power plants. And 9 is aerospace, where you'll find a lot of aircraft references, engine references. Products within that, in those particular groups are categories. A is systems, usually the hardware is found under Part A. B, test equipment, inspection equipment, production equipment. For instance, mentioned semiconductor equipment in Category 3. You'd find a lot of the production equipment under 3B. Materials, and these usually relate to the base materials, not a material that's been processed into something, but the actual raw materials. D is software, and E is technology used usually to produce, develop, or use any of the systems within A through D. The different types of controls we have, and this will become more apparent when we look at the CCL. The national security reasons, missile technology reasons, nuclear non-proliferation reasons, chem bioweapons reasons, and then there are within the 9 XX series of controls, anti-terrorism, crime control. You'll find regional stability, short supply, UN sanctions, and surreptitious listening for some of the telecom listings. Here's an example of how the different groups relate within a category, where you have 3A001 equipment assemblies, components. 3B would be the test and inspection equipment for those groups, and the production equipment. C would be the materials you use to make items, say, in Category 3A. D would be the software, design software, software that may be related to the production tools. And E would be the technology. And technology relates to drawings, schematics, discussions, information that you would use to either make the components, design the systems, examples like that. How to read an ECCM entry. You'll have your number, the heading are listed there. They're in the bold print, the bold listing. Reasons for control under license requirements. The license exceptions, again, the list-based ones, are available there. And then you get into the list of items controlled, related to units, related controls, related definitions and items. In some cases, there will be references to the Department of State controls. For instance, items that are for space technology or space qualified items, you will see a reference directing you over to the State Department for controls on those items, whereas you might have a particular piece of equipment that is listed on the CCL, but it can also be a space qualified system. That would direct you for that particular space qualified system over to the Department of State for licensing through them. Here's an example out of the ECCN for police helmets, shields, and parts. And you'll see the license requirement after you see the heading, ECCN and description. And the reason for control would be crime control, CC. You would go to your country chart and look under CC1 and locate your destination, and that would tell you whether or not a license would be required for that particular destination for that item. License exceptions, for this example, they're not applicable. There is no exception available for LVS, GBS, or CIV, and those are listed. The definition of those license exceptions are listed under Part 740. List of items controlled. Sometimes it'll give you a value limit, related controls, meaning other places to look for similar controls, and definitions. And here we have license requirements to get through that. List-based license exceptions. And again, the units, related controls, and related definitions. Here's another example for items under 2B007 for robots. Again, they break out the specific characteristics that would drive the controls for those robots. One experience that I have are people trying desperately to find out where their items are in the CCL, and they will pick ECCM numbers that are far removed from where the item should be. Your best experience with this should be to go through, see if you can identify it. If you're having an issue with it, you can call us. We can provide you some guidance. We cannot give you an ECCM number over the phone. We're not allowed to do that. We don't have all the information that you have in front of you, so it would not be an accurate classification. But we may be able to give you some guidance as to where you're looking toward the classification. But there are many instances where your items will not be listed on the CCL. So contact us if you have any questions. Submit a formal classification request if you're still at a loss for trying to find or make a determination whether it's listed on the CCL. But again, there are many items that are not listed on there. Now, that's why we have the performance criteria listed or specific characteristics cited to tell you that that particular item above that certain performance level would drive a license requirement, but below that, a license might be required. Just wanted to check ahead to see if we get into further definition on this example. But again, you can see the reasons for control here. National security reasons, you check your country chart for NS2 listings. If NS2 is not checked off, you would look under NP1 for those particular examples cited there, 2B007B. If your item is not one of those, you don't have to worry about NP1. AT controls, you check column AT1 to see if a license is required for that destination. License exceptions, LVS. If your transaction is less than $5,000, in this case, that's what LVS means here, you would go to the LVS guidance listing under Part 740 and follow through there, read to see if you're able to use the LVS exception to possibly a Group B country. Again, 2B007B and like C are excluded from that, so you would not be eligible if you had those products. EAR 99. This is a classification many people love to receive. It's for items that are not specifically listed on the Commerce Control List, but are still subject to the export regulations. And that means you're still subject to the general prohibitions of what's listed under the export regulations. The items that are EAR 99 can go to most places without a license, but again, check all the lists that will be cited during the presentations for the webinars. There are a list of entities where, depending on the country and actually the destination, meaning the final end user, the license may be required for an EAR 99 item. So it's worth checking the entity list to see if the destination drives a license requirement. If you receive the EAR 99 classification, you'd see something similar to the text below that's highlighted, saying that they're not listed, specified anywhere in the CCL or any other category in the CCL, and they're designated EAR 99. How can you obtain the ECCN for your item? You can ask the manufacturer, but it is your responsibility to make sure that that ECCN is accurate. They may give you an ECCN number. If possible, ask them for the classification number. They should have a document with a G, prefaced by a G. That's how classifications come into or go out of our office. It's like a license number, but it's a CCATS number, we call it. See if you can get that license or that number so we can reference it. But again, it's up to you to verify whether or not that is accurate. I've had cases where a manufacturer has overclassified an item and a license was not required for that destination. I've had just the opposite also, where someone's claimed it's EAR 99 and actual license was required. So it was just the exporter being very prudent and cautious in sending in a license for that item that we were able to check and verify the classifications on those items. So you can go to the manufacturer, but again, verify it because it's your responsibility. You may self-classify, which means you have a process in place within your office to go through the Commerce Control List and determine where your products fall on the Commerce Control List and determine the ECCN number. Make sure you work with someone who has technical knowledge of the item. That's very important because when you get into the performance-based listings, it helps to have someone who can distinguish between the different technical parameters. Or you can submit a formal classification request to BIS, then we'll take care of it. We'll ask you a number of questions, provide technical information, and we'll provide you with a classification. I believe we quote approximately 2-week turnaround time for classifications. It can run longer. It depends on how much information you provide up front to us. Approach to self-classifying items. Start with the index, the listing of all the items. You can go through compare your items against that listing. It may give you some guidance as to what categories to look against and check. You need to understand the functions and characteristics of the item that you're trying to classify, because that may drive you to other places in the Commerce Control List where you may find that item. Hints for a self-classification: don't leave it for the last minute, because you may start classifying it and have issues with it, and the only solution would be to submit a formal classification to BIS. We can try to turn it around as quickly as possible, but there are never any guarantees as to how quickly that might take. Understand the organization of the Commerce Control List and where to look. That's part of this webinar course, but also experience. If you don't leave the classification to the last minute, start early. Get familiar with the listings. Call us. Submit a classification, formal classification if you like, to check your logic against our logic and determining where your items fall. And develop an understanding of the technical parameters of the items. We deal with both engineers and administrative people and try to work through where the classifications fall. To request a classification, a formal classification through us, you have to go onto the SNAP-R system. We used to use paper. This got very burdensome, and our cubes were piled to the ceiling with different submissions by people. Using the SNAP-R system allows you to attach PDF files with all your technical information to the application, and it keeps the case files together so that we can reference them later. So it's very helpful to have everything electronically. You can make a best guess on the ECCM number. We will look at it, maybe use it as a starting point, but we will make the determination, and that will be the formal classification from us. There's no penalty for guessing right. There's no penalty for guessing wrong. It comes down to our review of it. A maximum of 6 items per request. The reason we limit you to 6 items is that sometimes people will try to submit their whole catalog to have us review all the items that their company makes. That would take us an inordinate amount of time to get through, so we limit you to 6 items. Sometimes it can be there can be similar items within the same family, but usually it has to be a very tight product set to start grouping items together. So we limit 6 items per classification request. Provide the details, the manufacturer, model number, applications help us to classify these items, the product specifications, include manufacturers' spec sheets if you have that, and as detailed as possible technical specifications of the items. Pictures are very helpful. Sometimes we get products in development, and having a picture of it or sales brochure is helpful for us to get a better understanding of the item. So in summary, on the classifications, determining an ECCM number, check with the manufacturer, and they should be able to give you some guidance on it. If not, provide the technical information from the manufacturer to help classify the item. Work with someone within your company who has technical knowledge of the item to help us go through the Commerce Control List and identify whether or not it's listed. Commerce Control List is, we think, organized in a logical manner so you can follow through the different listings there, whether it's hardware, test equipment, software, materials. And again, the ECCN entries are based on technical parameters of the items and also arranged by the different export control regimes for that item. So that's why you'll find different references in one ECCM listing that may push you to another ECCM listing based on some of the different export controls. For instance, if an item is considered more important to control for nuclear reasons, it may direct you to the ECCM number for nuclear items. And of course, you can also always file a formal classification for the item through BIS. I believe that's the end of the presentation. If there are any questions, we'll take them online.
Thank you very much, Mark. Now we will open the lines for voice questions. If you have a voice question, please press *1. Once again, if you have a voice question, please press *1 on your telephone, and I'll leave it up to the operator to handle the telephone calls.
We do have a question. Steve Black, your line is open.
Thank you. Just a question on this. Let's say, for example, that we classify an ECCN number, but we are off. We're wrong. What's the possible? And again, this isn't like nuclear warfare type stuff. This is kind of a commercial product. But if we do still file an export license and get all that aligned, but we're off on our coding, what can the ramifications be on that?
If you submit a license, the first thing we do when a license comes in is to validate or verify the ECCN number. So it shouldn't be an issue if you pick one ECCN number and we find it's not accurate. What it drives initially is who gets to see your license when it first comes in. For instance, if you classify it in Category 6 and it's actually a Category 3 item, it would be directed say, to my group first, where we would take a look at it and say, oh, no, it should be at a different group. We'll refer it over there. So it results in a short delay, but that's about it.
Okay. So as far as, so the information that you're using to judge is the description of the product that we would provide, is that correct?
Description of the product, any product specs you have, yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Our next question, Patty Ya, your line is open. Please check your mute button. Please pick up your headset.
I'm sorry. Thank you. My question is running the liability, or if you could comment on the liability for providing an ECCN number to a third party that was cited for having exported under the wrong ECCN.
Can you restate that? If just an example, your company provided the wrong ECCN number to someone who exported and that was cited as a violation, an export violation?
Yes. Not knowingly provided the wrong one, that it was misassigned, but it was provided to a third party who, under your guidance, requested one from a manufacturer, and that third party happened to be the one who was cited for improper or incorrect ECCN. Can you comment on liability to the manufacturer or original assigner of the ECCN?
I would not be able to respond to that because I'm not sure of the answer to it. We would have to direct you to someone else within our office. They may be able to.
Okay, thank you.
Our next question, Canon One, your line is open.
Yeah. The question is regarding the ECCN number. Is very easy to determine the first two digits, that is first number and second. Can you explain me how you come exactly decide the third digit about ECCN number?
Now, when you say third digit, you're referring to where we start the three-digit code?
Let me give an example. It's something like ECCN number. I'm trying to find out. First is the group number, first number, then the group number, and I'm talking about the third number of ECCN, which is, for example, if when you are saying ECCN number 0A983, I understand 0A983, I understand very well 0A, but how you come to the 9 number, 8 number and 3 number written up in the group?
Part of it has to do with the control regime where the item is listed under. And
you have a group like saying one number is material, chemical, toxin, second number is material processing, third number is electronic. From there, the first number comes. Second number comes from the group like A, equipment, B, test, C, material, D, the software. That is. But how the third number comes?
Yeah, it's a combination of several things. One is the control regime, meaning is it considered a crime control item or a nuclear or control for it. And sometimes they're not sequential. They are a mix of, there'll be a crime control, then maybe anti-terrorist control item, but sometimes it refers to also when the regulation was passed and there was a place in the listing for it.
But we cannot come to definitely which one is the third one, right?
You just have to work through the different listings.
Okay, I have a listing here which says 0 is national security, 1 is missile technology, 2 is nuclear proliferation, 3 chemical and biological weapons, and 9 is anti-terrorism. Are you referring to the same list?
One moment. We'll be happy to answer that question. Just hold on.
Just some clarification on that when you start getting up into the 900 series of controls, those are typically unilateral controls, meaning just controls that the U.S. itself lists for items. I know that doesn't help you classify the item, but that's the nature of the 900 series.
I see. And you think it is not very useful for us to decide that, right, on ourselves?
Well, you have to look at the different listings and review your product specs and see if it falls within a particular control. So if it happens to fall within the 900 series, that's where that control would be compared against the commerce country chart.
And can we see anywhere those 900 series you are when referring to? Is it something available in BIS manual?
Foreign policy and unilateral controls. You have to go through the commerce control. If I understand your question correctly, you go through the different listings, check the appendix for the itemized listing to see if your products might be highlighted there to direct you somewhere on the commerce list.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Once again, to ask a question, please press star 1. One moment. There are no further questions.
Okay, we'll go now to our written questions. I'll start with the first question I have here from Nancy Franis. She'd like to know, can we please expand on the CCATS? Where is this addressed in the export regulations administration? Is it?
Now, the CCATS, I don't know if you're referring to the process of working through a CCATS application, or for those of you who don't know, CCATS is the process of getting a commodity classification through the Department of Commerce. We refer to CCATS, and it is a process that's listed on SNAP-R to apply through. And expanding on the CCATS process, I'm not sure if you could submit the question with more detail or question on the phone.
Yeah, if you could expand on that question, then by dialing star 1, then Mark can help you. Well, let's go to the next question from Ignacio Reyes. At the end of the ECCN number, what is the subcategory? For example, looks like 1C992. Or I'm sorry, I meant read. Yeah, .E. Okay. 1C992.E.
We'll be there in a minute.
Okay. In the meantime, Nancy, if you'd like to expand on your question and call by dialing star 1 while we're helping the other person with their question, that'd be great.
We do have some other questions. Canon One, your line is open. Your line is open. Please check your mute.
Okay. No, I said my name was Ramesh Kulkarni and then something went in between. Do you want me to ask the question?
Yes, please.
Okay. This question is actually it's concerned with commerce country list, which was not much of the said anything about that today. But I have a simple question. When I look at the commerce country list and when I look at every category, I see in each category there are 3 different classifications. For example, under the chemical and biological, I say CB, CB1, CB2, and CB3. In nuclear purification, I see 2 groups, NP1, NP2, and so on. Crime control also I see CC1, CC2, and CC3. What are these 3 different groups for each country? When you say crime control, one crime control is enough, but you have 3 classifications. What are those?
The different subspecies within the listings relate to the concern among the groups developing the different controls, meaning, for instance, under CB1, that's the most restrictive, meaning licenses are required to the most number of countries. So that particular product, while classified for CB, was thought to be more of a security issue.
That is a common product, you mean?
Pardon me?
It's very common product that comes under chemical and biological weapons, and there are some specialties also. Those are put in the separate group.
Mm-hmm. Well, there are. It's broken down as to different levels of criticality for standard reduced diversion, whereas an item classified under CB1, there was a higher risk of diversion or concerns for diversion than CB2, and then CB3 may have a different set of countries that they're less concerned with, but that still merits control to particular countries. So it's based on the item and the risk associated with it.
Okay, thank you.
And keep in mind that within the ECCM classification, that it does give you the breakdown of which CB listing to look. For instance, CB, whether it's controlled under 1, 2, or 3. Same with NS2 or NP controls.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Our next question, Nancy Franis, your line is open.
Thank you. Basically what I was asking is that when I go back to an OEM and ask them for an ECCM, I wanted to be able to elaborate to also ask for the CCAT number. And I just wanted to know where it is that I can read about it so I have more information on it. I didn't see it easily on the website.
That you're going to an OEM to ask for an ECCM number from them on a product?
Right. Right. And you mentioned earlier that we're responsible for what they provide to us, so you recommended that we also ask them for this CCAT number, and I just wanted to read a little bit more about it so I understood what it's all about.
Oh, the CCAT number is a case file number. If they submitted a formal classification to us, we would assign it a case number, and at the end of the process, they would get case number G08 something, run off for 4 or 5 digits, and that would be our reference and their reference for the future for where to look up the classification for that item. That's all that number is. It's a case file that we refer to.
Thanks.
You're welcome. The question on ECCN 1C992E. We went to 1C992E and I don't quite understand what the subcategory is. It just refers to detonators and assemblies that contain less than or equal to 0.01 kilograms of controlled materials. If you could elaborate on that question, it would be helpful to answer it.
That is Ignacio Reyes. And to ask that question, Ignacio, just press *1 on your telephone. Ignacio, once again, if you want to elaborate on that question, press *1, but I think we have an explanation here for you for your question.
Your line is open, sir.
Hello?
About that subcategory, I was just wondering if it was required and where we can find it.
Well, the subcategory, I assume you're referring to the .E at the end of 1C992?
Yes.
Okay, we try to make the classifications as specific as possible, meaning if the item can be broken down that far, yes, include it, because that can refer to other controls that may relate to that particular item. For instance, there may be license exceptions that you would be eligible for because it has the E on the end of it. There may be further restrictions that limit where you could send the item to. So it should be included in your classification to help you be more specific as to any licensing implications of that item.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, while we're accepting still more voice questions, I'll continue on with some of the written questions. Yukio Ashizawa has a question about how to print out the presentation slides. On the upper right-hand side of your computer screen, you're going to see an icon. It looks like there are 3 pieces of paper, 1, 2 behind each or 1 behind each other one. If you put your mouse's cursor over that icon, you will have an option to actually download. I have uploaded those slides. You can download the slides by putting a check mark on the box and then actually uploading them or downloading them on your either computer or on an account or a folder within your computer. So it is actually on the webinar. These are how you can get your presentation slides. It looks like, continuing on, we've helped Nancy with her question. Now we'll go on to the next question.
We do have a question on the audio portion.
Okay, go ahead with the question from the audio.
Patty Yao, your line is open.
Thank you. I just wanted to get clarification on the CCATS discussion that just took place. Is it correct in my understanding that if I would like the BIS to assign an ECCM, that I would submit a SNAP-R, and the result of my SNAP-R is a CCATS number and a case file number that I could reference as the BIS confirmation? Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
And then process.
I had an additional question, too. I wondered whether or not there was any sort of challenge process, if you will, to the SNAP-R or CCATS process, like there is, let's say, for the import side, in which you can request a ruling from the Customs Service for a product that you're going to import. say, for example, it ends up being a commodity that's licensable when you don't believe necessarily that it is, or maybe some of the information was misinterpreted?
If I understand your question, you can always you can challenge our classification. You can provide further documentation that may try to have some impact on where we classify the item, but you would go directly through us and would probably go through the same licensing officer to have a reevaluation of your supplemental or supporting documentation to back up your discussion on the item.
Okay, thank you.
Before you had a question on classification requests. It's referenced in the EAR, part 748.3.
Okay. 748.3. Okay, thank you.
While we're waiting for more voice questions, let's go to the next written question here. This is from Mona Karwandi. She says, my item is classified under ECCN 5A992B with a period, okay. I read through the regulations, but I still need clarification on the B period part. And while we're looking up and researching here, if there's any voice questions, please press *1.
Mona?
Yes.
Oh,
she's just written.
Okay. For encryption products, I would defer to the encryption group because that's a very complicated issue, and there are several people who do deal specifically with groups or with technology within that area. So, and we could put you in touch with someone within that group to contact.
Looks like we have an extension number, phone number here for you.
Yeah, you can call 202-482-0707.
Okay, and then our last question here on the written portion of the Q&A session is from Beverly Yoakum again. When selling to a distributor, are we liable for their end user if on the embargoed listing from the U.S.? Okay, we have an answer for you.
There's Part 758 of the export regulations. You are responsible to do due diligence into the end users, and that includes if you're selling to a distributor and you have knowledge of who they may be selling to. So it's a process you have to put in place to review as best you can the customers of the distributor.
Okay, I hope that answers your question, Beverly. And we are getting close and past the hour, so I'm going to open the line one more time for any voice questions, and then we'll conclude this presentation. To ask a voice question, please press *1.
There are no questions.
Okay, well, then that concludes our presentation, our webinar for today. For those of you who might have additional questions, is there a contact number where they can call? Go to the BIS's website at www.bis.doc.gov. Also, please check www.export.gov, which is the U.S. Commercial Services website, for additional information on this Bureau of Industry and Security's webinar series on the Export Administration Regulations. You can register on that website, www.export.gov. We have a continuation of 6 more webinars within this series, so you still have time to register. Also, I'd like to thank all of our participants for joining us for today, and also our main speaker, Mark Jaso. Thank you very much for your presentation, and Angela Robinson for her input, as also George, a gentleman here who just kind of joined us for his help. So I'd like to thank everybody, and please remember to check your email boxes for more information on upcoming webinars. Goodbye.
Thank you. That concludes today's conference call. All lines may disconnect. Once again, that concludes today's conference call.